MGM gave Judy Garland pills at age 13, and what happened next will haunt you forever. But that's just the beginning of a story so dark, so twisted, that Hollywood buried it for decades. What I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about the golden age of cinema. They called her Little Miss Showbiz, America's sweetheart, the girl with the golden voice who skipped down the yellow brick road and into our hearts. But behind that radiant smile was a child trapped in a nightmare that would make horror movies look like fairy tales. And the most terrifying part, everyone knew. The studio executives, the directors, her own mother. They all knew exactly what they were doing to Frances Ethel Gum, the girl the world would know as Judy Garland. At exactly 4 minutes in, I'll reveal the specific drug cocktail MGM forced into this child's body every single day. By minute 8, you'll hear the actual words studio executives used to break her spirit. And at minute 15, I'm going to share something about her death that investigators discovered, but Hollywood desperately tried to hide. But first, let me take you back to 1935, when a 13-year-old girl walked through the gates of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios. She had no idea she was walking into a prison that would hold her captive for the rest of her life. The studio system of the 1930s and 40s wasn't just controlling, it was a machine designed to create stars and destroy souls. Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, took one look at young Judy and saw dollar signs. But there was a problem. In his words, she wasn't pretty enough, too short, too plump, that wholesome girl next door look that millions would come to love. Mayer hated it. He wanted glamour, he wanted thin, he wanted control. The solution came in a small white pill. Benzedrine, the studio doctor said, sliding the bottle across his desk. It'll curb her appetite and give her energy for those 18-hour shooting days. What he didn't mention was that Benzedrine was pure amphetamine, speed, and once it entered Judy's bloodstream, it would never truly leave. But the pills were just the beginning of a systematic destruction that reads like a psychological torture manual. Every morning, Judy would be weighed. If she gained even half a pound, her meals for the day would be replaced with a bowl of chicken soup, not multiple bowls, one bowl for the entire day. A growing teenage girl dancing and singing for hours on end, surviving on nothing but broth and diet pills. The studio went further. They assigned minders to watch her constantly. These weren't guardians or protectors. They were spies reporting back every bite of food she tried to sneak, every moment she showed fatigue, every tear she shed. One minder, whose name I'll reveal in a moment, was specifically instructed to follow Judy into restaurants and physically remove food from her hands if she ordered anything not approved by the studio. Here's where it gets even darker. When Judy would inevitably crash from the amphetamines, when her young body would scream for rest after days without real sleep, the studio had another solution: barbiturates, sleeping pills to bring her down, amphetamines to bring her back up, a pharmaceutical seesaw that no human body, let alone a child's, was designed to endure. By age 15, Judy Garland was taking pills to wake up, pills to work, pills to not eat, pills to sleep, and pills to counteract the side effects of all the other pills. The studio had created an addiction that would torment her for the remaining 32 years of her life, but they didn't care. The Wizard of Oz was about to start filming, and they needed their Dorothy ready to perform. Now at the 4-minute mark, let me tell you exactly what they were putting in her body. The morning cocktail consisted of Benzedrine or Dexedrine, pure amphetamines that would be illegal to give a child today. By noon, she'd receive what they called vitamin shots, but were actually methamphetamine injections. Yes, meth. They were injecting a 15-year-old with meth to keep her thin and energetic. When filming ran late, which it always did, they'd give her Dexamyl, a hellish combination of amphetamine and barbiturate that kept you wired but supposedly took the edge off. By evening, when her heart was racing and her hands shaking from the stimulants, they'd give her Seconal or Nembutal, barbiturates so powerful they're used for lethal injections today. The physical effects were horrifying. Judy's hands trembled constantly. She developed a nervous habit of pulling at her hair until bald spots appeared, which the makeup department had to cover. Her period stopped. At 16, her body was so malnourished and drug-addled that it simply ceased normal biological functions. But the show must go on. Mickey Rooney, her co-star and friend, later revealed something that MGM tried to suppress for decades. He walked into Judy's dressing room one day to find her collapsed on the floor. Foam at her mouth, pills scattered around her. She was 16 years old. The studio doctor was called, not a real hospital, not paramedics, but the studio doctor who had prescribed the pills in the first place. He revived her, adjusted her medications, and she was back on set within hours. No one spoke of it again, but the pills were just one weapon in MGM's arsenal of control. Let's talk about what Louis B. Mayer would say to this teenage girl. Mayer, a man in his 50s with absolute power over her career, would call Judy into his office for what he termed pep talks. These weren't motivational speeches. They were systematic verbal abuse designed to break her spirit entirely. "You're my little hunchback," he'd say, pinching her cheeks hard enough to leave marks. He'd force her to stand in profile while he pointed out every perceived flaw. "Look at that stomach. Do you want to be a star or a pig?" When she cried, which she always did, he'd add, "And now your face is all blotchy. The camera hates blotchy faces." The psychological torture was calculated. They assigned her a publicist whose main job was to plant stories in the press about Judy's weight. Imagine being 15 years old and reading headlines about how you're pleasantly plump or working hard to slim down for her fans. The studio was literally paying newspapers to publicly shame a child about her body. Here's a detail that will haunt you. The commissary at MGM had Judy's picture posted in the kitchen with special instructions. If she ordered anything substantial, the waiters were to bring her a bowl of chicken broth and a plate of lettuce instead, no matter what she asked for. They would do this in front of other actors, directors, crew members, public humiliation disguised as caring for her health. Clark Gable once witnessed this happening and was so disgusted he told the waiter to bring Judy a proper meal and put it on his tab. The next day, Gable was called into Mayer's office and told to mind his own business regarding the studio's investment. That's all Judy was to them, an investment that needed to be protected, even if it meant destroying the human being inside. The Wizard of Oz shooting was where the abuse reached its peak. The dress fittings were torture sessions. The wardrobe department had been instructed to make Judy's dresses slightly too small to motivate her to lose weight. They would literally sew her into costumes that compressed her ribcage, making it hard to breathe, let alone sing. The famous blue gingham dress? It came with a specially designed corset that flattened her developing chest and squeezed her waist to create the little girl silhouette they wanted. Between takes, Judy would rush off, set to loosen the corset, just to breathe properly, only to be cinched back in moments before the camera rolled. Now here's something that was covered up for 40 years. During the famous Somewhere Over the Rainbow scene, Judy was so drugged she couldn't remember the lyrics to her own song. The take you see in the movie, it's actually the 47th attempt. The previous 46 were ruined by Judy either slurring her words from barbiturates or singing so fast from amphetamines that it was unusable. The studio solution? More drugs to find the perfect balance. We're now at mine at 8, and I need to share the actual words that broke Judy's spirit forever. During one particularly brutal day of shooting, Judy had gained 2 pounds. Mayer called her into his office with the director, Victor Fleming, and several studio executives present. What happened next was witnessed by Fleming's assistant, who years later revealed the truth. Mayer made Judy strip down to her underwear in front of these men. She was 16 years old. As she stood there trembling and crying, Mayer circled her like a predator, pointing out every area where she had failed the studio. "Look at these thighs," he said. "Each pound of fat cost me thousands of dollars. Do you want to bankrupt MGM?" When Judy tried to cover herself with her hands, Mayer slapped them away. "If you're going to act like a baby, I'll treat you like one." He then had the studio doctor give her an injection, right there in front of everyone, of what was likely methamphetamine. "Now get back to work," he said, "and don't eat anything for the rest of the day." Fleming, to his minimal credit, looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. None of them said anything. They all just watched a powerful middle-aged man drug and humiliate a teenage girl, then sent her back to perform like nothing had happened. This was Hollywood's golden age. The drugs weren't just affecting Judy's body, they were rewiring her brain. Amphetamines at that dosage, especially in a developing adolescent brain, caused permanent changes to neural pathways. She developed severe insomnia, paranoia, and hallucinations. There are reports from crew members of Judy talking to people who weren't there, swatting at invisible bugs, convinced that the studio had planted recording devices in her trailer. And in a cruel irony, she might have been right about the surveillance. MGM had a network of informants who reported on their star's every move. Judy's driver was paid extra to report where she went. Her hairdresser documented everything she said. Even her dates were often young actors, instructed by the studio to escort her to events and report back on her behavior. The studio controlled her finances too. Despite being one of MGM's biggest stars, Judy saw almost none of her earnings. Her paychecks went directly to the studio, which would then give her an allowance. A teenage girl earning millions was given pocket money like a child, keeping her financially dependent on the very system that was destroying her. But perhaps the cruelest betrayal came from someone who should have protected her, her own mother, Ethel Gum. Ethel wasn't just complicit in the abuse, she was an active participant. It was Ethel who first gave Judy diet pills at age 10, before MGM ever entered the picture. When the studio demanded Judy lose weight, Ethel would personally enforce starvation diets at home. Here's a story that Judy's first husband, David Rose, later shared. He once arrived at Judy's house to find Ethel force-feeding her daughter diet pills. Judy was crying, begging her mother to let her skip them just once because they made her heart race. Ethel's response: "Your heart can race all at once. Your career can't afford for you to get fat." Rose tried to intervene, suggesting Judy looked fine as she was. Ethel turned on him with venom. "You don't understand the business. I've sacrificed everything for Judy's career. Everything." She then made Judy swallow the pills while Rose watched, helpless. The marriage to Rose didn't last. How could it? Judy was so damaged by this point that normal relationships were impossible. She would stay up for days on amphetamines, then crash into barbiturate-induced stupors. She'd have violent mood swings, paranoid episodes, crying jags that lasted hours. Rose later said loving Judy was like trying to hold water in your hands, beautiful but impossible. Now I'm approaching minute 15, and I need to tell you about Judy's death and what investigators found that Hollywood desperately wanted hidden. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland was found dead in her London bathroom. She was 47 years old but looked decades older. The official cause of death was accidental overdose of barbiturates, but the real story is far more sinister. The autopsy revealed things that weren't made public for years. Judy's liver was severely cirrhotic, damaged not just from pills but from the liquid barbiturates she'd been drinking when pills no longer worked. Her heart showed signs of chronic stimulant abuse dating back decades. Most shocking, her brain showed patterns consistent with someone who'd been given methamphetamine since childhood. But here's what Hollywood tried to bury. Investigators found Judy's diary, which contained detailed accounts of her abuse at MGM. Names, dates, specific incidents of forced drugging and abuse. The diary mysteriously disappeared from evidence shortly after. It was only through the persistence of her children that fragments of information came to light years later. One entry dated from 1940 when she was just 18 read, "They're killing me slowly. I know it and they know it. But the box office is good, so nobody cares. When I die, they'll say it was tragic. But it's not tragedy when it's murder in slow motion." The coroner, Gavin Thistlewood, made an unusual statement after the autopsy. "This is one of the most damaged bodies I've ever examined in someone so young. The level of pharmaceutical damage suggests a lifetime of chemical abuse that no human should endure." He was pressured to soften his official report, removing references to the extent of historical damage. What's even more heartbreaking is that Judy knew exactly what had been done to her. In her final interview, given just weeks before her death, she said something that PBS tried to edit out. "I was just a thing to them, a product. They created Judy Garland, but they destroyed Frances Gum. And when you kill the person inside, the star can't survive." The interview footage shows her hands shaking uncontrollably as she speaks. Her voice, once so powerful it could fill concert halls, was reduced to a whisper. But her eyes held a fury that 3 decades of abuse couldn't extinguish. "They stole my childhood, my health, my sanity. But I want people to know. I want them to understand what Hollywood does to its children." Hollywood's reaction to her death was exactly what she predicted. The same studio executives who had destroyed her released glowing tributes. Louis B. Mayer, who had died in 1957, was posthumously quoted through old interviews as having loved Judy like a daughter. The same man who called her a hunchback and forced her to strip in his office. The same industry that had turned her into an addict held benefit concerts in her memory. The same doctors who had prescribed the killing doses appeared on talk shows to discuss the tragedy of addiction, never mentioning their role in creating it. But Judy's story didn't end with her death. It became a cautionary tale that Hollywood refused to learn from. Other child stars came forward with similar stories: prescription drugs, forced starvation, psychological torture. It was systemic. But the machine kept running, finding new young talents to feed into its maw. What makes this even more infuriating is that everyone knew. There are documented accounts from dozens of actors, directors, and crew members who witnessed Judy's abuse. Not one of them spoke up publicly while she was alive. They all chose their careers over a child's life. Joan Crawford, in her own memoir, admitted, "We all saw what they were doing to Judy. We gossiped about it at parties, but nobody did anything. In Hollywood, you learn to look the other way, or you don't last long." This from a woman who publicly called Judy a dear friend. The pharmaceutical companies bear their share of blame too. Smith, Klein, and French, the makers of Dexedrine, actively marketed their amphetamines to Hollywood studios as performance enhancers for young actors. They knew children were being given these drugs. They even had special Hollywood representatives who worked directly with studio doctors. Internal documents revealed decades later showed the companies tracking the success of their products through box office receipts. One memo actually stated, "The Garland girls' performance in Oz demonstrates the effectiveness of our compound in maintaining energy through extended shooting schedules." They were literally using a drugged child as a marketing case study. Even more disturbing were the experiments. Judy's medical records, obtained by her daughter Liza Minnelli in the 1990s, show that studio doctors were testing drug combinations on her. Different dosages, different mixtures, timing experiments. She was a human guinea pig for the pharmaceutical industry's Hollywood division. One combination they noted as particularly effective was Dexedrine in the morning, Benzedrine boosters throughout the day, and Seconal at night. This exact combination would later be found in medicine cabinets of dozens of dead celebrities throughout the 60s and 70s. Judy Garland wasn't just a victim, she was patient zero in Hollywood's prescription drug epidemic. The sexual abuse allegations are even darker. While Judy never explicitly detailed sexual assault, she hinted at it throughout her life. She once told her third husband, Sid Luft, that there were things that happened at the studio that nobody should know about, things that would destroy people if they came out. Multiple child actors from that era have since revealed that sexual abuse was rampant in the studio system. The same executives who controlled every aspect of their lives also felt entitled to their bodies. The drugs made it easier. A drugged child can't fight back, can't clearly remember, can't testify credibly. There are gaps in Judy's timeline that remain unexplained. Days when she was supposedly sick, but no medical records exist. Times when she returned to set with bruises that makeup had to cover. Fellow actress Ann Rutherford once said, "There were mornings when Judy would come in looking like she'd been through hell. We'd ask if she was okay, and she'd just say studio business and change the subject." But perhaps the most damning evidence comes from Judy herself. In therapy sessions recorded in the 1960s, discovered after her death, she can be heard telling her psychiatrist, "They took everything from me, everything, my childhood, my body, my mind. They passed me around like a toy, and when I broke, they just pumped me full of more drugs to keep me performing." When the psychiatrist asked her to be more specific about who they were and what passed around meant, the tape mysteriously cuts off. The next session begins with Judy heavily sedated and unable to recall the previous conversation. Her psychiatrist's notes from that day simply state, "Patient became agitated discussing past. Administered standard sedation." The ripple effects of Judy's destruction spread far beyond her own tragedy. Her children grew up with a mother who loved them desperately but couldn't function normally. Liza Minnelli has spoken about finding her mother unconscious multiple times as a child, about learning to check for a pulse before she learned to tie her shoes. Judy's son, Joey Luft, revealed that one of his earliest memories was his mother teaching him how to hide pills from her when she was feeling too good. A 6-year-old boy was tasked with protecting his mother from herself, because an entire industry had failed to protect her when she was a child. The financial exploitation continued until the end. Despite earning millions throughout her career, Judy died essentially broke. The IRS was after her for back taxes on money she'd never actually received. Her homes had been sold to pay debts. She was performing in dingy nightclubs just to survive, while MGM continued to profit from her movies. Here's a figure that will enrage you. In 1969, the year Judy died, MGM made $3.7 million from television broadcasts of The Wizard of Oz alone. Judy's estate received nothing. The studio that destroyed her continued to profit from her destruction for decades after her death. But the true horror is that Judy Garland wasn't unique. She was simply the most visible victim of a system designed to consume children for profit. Shirley Temple was given appetite suppressants. Mickey Rooney was fed amphetamines. Elizabeth Taylor was subjected to similar abuse. The list goes on and on. What makes Judy's case particularly heartbreaking is how talented she was naturally. Voice coaches who worked with her said she had perfect pitch and instinctive timing that couldn't be taught. She didn't need drugs to perform miracles. She needed protection, nurturing, and basic human decency. Imagine what Judy Garland could have been in a different world, a world where her talent was nurtured instead of exploited, where her body was allowed to be whatever shape it naturally was, where her childhood was protected instead of stolen. We'll never know that Judy Garland because Hollywood made sure she never existed. The studio system eventually crumbled, but not because of moral awakening. It fell apart because television offered new options and actors gained more power. The abuse simply evolved, became more subtle, less centralized, but still present. Young actors today still face pressure to maintain impossible body standards, to use prescription drugs to enhance performance, to sacrifice their well-being for their careers. Every time you watch The Wizard of Oz, remember that the girl clicking her ruby slippers was being slowly murdered by the very people who put those shoes on her feet. Every time you hear Over the Rainbow, know that the voice singing about escaping to a better place belonged to a child who never found that escape. Judy Garland's story isn't just Hollywood history. It's a crime scene that played out in slow motion over 47 years. It's a murder mystery where we know the killers, the methods, and the motives, but justice never came because the murderers wrote the laws. They gave a 13-year-old girl pills that would eventually kill her, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They destroyed her body, mind, and spirit systematically and deliberately. They profited from her talent while poisoning her existence. And when she finally died, they called it a tragedy instead of what it really was. The inevitable conclusion of a horror story that began the day Frances Gumm became Judy Garland. The saddest part. If Judy could see how her movies still bring joy to millions, she'd probably forgive everyone who hurt her, because that's who she was, a gentle soul who just wanted to make people happy. They turned that beautiful impulse into a weapon against her, using her own kindness to keep her compliant, while they destroyed her. But we can't forgive. We can't forget. Because somewhere right now, another young talent is being told they're too fat, too plain, too difficult. Somewhere another child is being handed pills to make them more marketable. Somewhere another Frances Gumm is being transformed into a product for our consumption. The only way to honor Judy Garland's memory is to remember not just the star, but the human being who was sacrificed to create her, to speak the truth about what was done to her, to refuse to let Hollywood romanticize a tragedy they created, to protect today's children from suffering the same fate. Judy once said, "If I'm such a legend, then why am I so lonely?" She knew the answer. Legends are stories we tell. But Frances Ethel Gumm was a real person who deserved love, protection, and the chance to live beyond 47. She deserved so much more than rainbow and ruby slippers. She deserved a life. The next time someone tells you about the golden age of Hollywood, remember that gold. It was mined from the bones of children like Judy Garland. It shimmered with the tears of young actors, forced to choose between their dreams and their lives. It was polished with pills that promised stardom but delivered slavery. That's the true story of Judy Garland. Not a tragedy but a crime. Not a cautionary tale, but an indictment. Not just a piece of Hollywood history, but a mirror reflecting an industry that still hasn't fully faced what it's capable of doing to those who trust it with their dreams. They killed Frances Gumm to create Judy Garland, and then when there was nothing left to take, they killed Judy Garland too. The only question that remains is how many more have to die before we finally say enough.